thanks for inviting me and all the community. It's a great pleasure to be here and to share my knowledge, in this case, on this session, about using Business Central to support the warehouse requirements and processes. And as I said to Raz, here it is my introduction and my contacts. So as I said, my name is José. I am solution architect. I work in KPMG UK. So before COVID, I was based in London. Now I am based in Teams. So online available, I believe that then as a lot of us. So you have here my personal contact, my personal LinkedIn, and also my personal blog. That the main idea is always to share knowledge about everything related with the Microsoft Business Application apps without code. So no code or even low code, it's the main goal of this blog. So I work with Microsoft Dynamics Business Central on the last 16 years. But since I left university, I also work all the time with ERP. So here it is some of them: Oracle applications, Business Central, Sage X3. Before I moved to London 2 years ago, I was also invited teacher in university. And during my career, I work always in consulting, starting as business consultant, and after having the normal path in this area, becoming project manager, engagement leader, team leader, site manager. I worked 2 years on a different city. So I started in Porto, but during 2 years, I was the site manager of the Lisbon office of my previous company. And after I moved more for the sales side and pre-sale side, and now I am solution architect. Looking for my past, the most complex implementation were on fashion, food, and pharmaceuticals. But of course that I also implement and help to implement NAV and Business Central in other industries. So some personal insights. I am really a food, wine, and gin lover. And I think that I am a sports addicted also, so runner, tracker, and before moving to London bodyboarder. Moving for the agenda. So I will start my presentation really to give a personal perspective about Business Central. And I believe that during the day, other sessions also present the same perspective. After, I will jump for the main topic, the inventory and warehouse models. And I intend to show different scenarios on a live demo, how we can use Business Central in different types of company. At the end, I will share my lessons learned. So these 20 years implementing ERPs, I know some do's and some don'ts. And of course that I will be free now or after for some questions. And I will try my best to answer all of them. So, all about Business Central. I know that we have a lot of history, different logos, Navision, Dynamics Nav, different logos, and this is the last one. And a lot of the community still looks for Business Central as this product that has these nice new logos and it is for ERP, and is trying to solve the business requirements related to this area. But personally, on the last 2-3 years, I think that is not anymore like this. So in my perspective, Business Central now is a piece of the ecosystem from Microsoft that we also have the Office 365, Azure, the Power Platform, the Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, virtual agents, and the connection with the CDS and AI. Everything is part of this. So that's why my other session is really connecting the Business Central with the Power Automate, because I believe that a lot of times the community still focus on the little product that is Business Central and does not look for the overall solution. And when we are fighting with our competitors, we should fight, in my view, with all of these, because if you look for our competitors, they do not have these different options connected, and this is really powerful. So, jumping for the main topic of the session, stock control or inventory control. So here I really use the help of Google, and we can see that is everything that we want to control in terms of quantities for what we call items or service, including raw materials and finished goods. So the first thing that I want to explain is the mapping with this concept with Business Central. So to cover this area, we have two models, the inventory and the warehouse. And if we look for the pricing and the license guide from Microsoft, we do not see clearly two models. So Microsoft is trying to put together the two, but there are some difference in implementing the first one and the second, and I will cover that later on. The other topic is about warehouses. So we can have physical, virtual, and here I put two examples, a quality one, in transit, or even outsource. If we need this, the mapping to Business Central are really what is called location. Finally, the next topic is a small detail inside the location that sometimes we have and sometimes we don't have. That can be the positions or shelves that in Business Central are bins. And finally, looking for the items, even if it is a raw material, a finished good, or a retail item, we are talking about items. So this is the main entities that we should use to implement this area on Business Central. So for the people that is starting with Business Central on this area, I will jump now from the PowerPoint to the live environment, and I want really to suggest that if you are starting, sometimes you do not know where to start or what it is the best way to start. And as you know, in Business Central, we have different profiles. So if you want to start on this area, inventory and warehouse, I really suggest to use this one, shipping and receiving, warehouse management system. And now I jump to the sandbox. And if we look here for my settings, we can see that we have different roles or different profiles. And in my opinion, a good start should be, please use this one. And if you select this one, the role center and the starting page is this one. And you have a good starting point to explore all the functionalities that we are looking for on the next areas. I said before that in my perspective, there is a difference between the stock and warehouse models. And I will try to explain now, in my perspective, what is the real difference. But later on with the demo, I think that will be more clear for all the persons that are attending this session. So in my perspective, the stock model is really when you post directly on the documents. So if we are on the purchase order and you just post, this post means that you are updating the stock on the inventory model, on the stock model, and you do not need really to jump to another profile, another area of the system to start to use it using the stock control. The second option, that is what is common to say, that is the warehouse model, is when you have two steps. So one step is the documents from the business, the purchase order, the sales order, the transfer order, as one step. And at the same time, on the warehouse, usually a different user has a different document to post. I think that there is one person that is not muted and there is a background noise. So if you are not muted, please mute yourself. Thank you. So I was saying in my perspective, the big difference between the stock and the warehouse models. And now I will start to show on the system the mapping that I showed before. The good thing about this profile is that we do not need to look on different areas, different options, what we are looking for. So if we click here, we have the access to the things that we need. So the first one is the locations. And as I said, we can have different locations with different setups that can be physical warehouse, can be virtual, or even outsource. So we can set up the ones that we need. Clicking on the last one, this one, I talk about bins. And here it is the example. So I start on this warehouse, and after I have a breakdown with some bins. And the bins can be the corridor, can be the shelf, can be the position, can be the box. It depends really on the physical warehouse that you need. And finally, we also have the item. And you know, when you click on the item, you have a list of all the items. And one functionality that the end users just love Business Central is when they jump to this list and they have all the items, they have immediately here the quantity on hand. And as you can see, looking for this view, we also are seeing some information about the stock. So for example, the first line, we can have 110 pieces because the unit of measure is pieces. And this is the overall inventory that we have for this item. At the same time, if we prefer to have a view that is by location, or I mean by warehouse, Using this option, items by location, we can see that we can check, looking for the rows, all the items, and looking for the columns, the quantity per warehouse. So if we remember, we have on the first item 110 and 100 are on this warehouse and the rest are on this warehouse. So this is the really more simple way to use Business Central to support the inventory control. So I will show you a very simple transaction. And you can see that in this case, we just need to refer the item, the location, and the quantity. And when we post, it's everything done. So the stock is updated, and we do not need to jump to another screen in the warehouse. And during the day, we saw some presentation. For example, I remember the one from Paul that explains that in Philippines, they have a lot of small companies, a lot of family companies. And in that case, you do not need a complex setup to run Business Central on the warehouse area. So if I look again for the items, the quantity on hand is automatically updated. The second nice functionality that we have on Business Central is really the drill down. So if we want to see the item ledger entry for this item, we just click on the quantity and we can see all the transactions, including the one that I just made now. So this is one possible scenario to implement stock control in Business Central. Very simple, very easy, without a lot of setup, and I would say almost ready to go for a new implementation. Now, I will start to increase some complexity on this very simple scenario. So I will click now on a different item. And on this item, besides the item code and the description, on the item tracking tab, sorry, we have the ability to select what is the item tracking code. And as you can see here, I select on this item that we have lot tracking. That means that when I look for this item and I click on the inventory, I do not see only the drill down of the 53, but I can see the quantity per lot. So this way of working is the same in terms of the warehouse, but looking for the item, if we want to control the lots, for example, food industry, pharmaceuticals, we need the control of the lot because of the expire date for the FIFO and these type of requirements. And this way, we just need to set up the item with the item tracking with lot. And again, the third option is similar one, but not with the lot, but the serial number. So here on the same option, we can select that this item is serial control. And this is good, for example, for electrical products, mobile phones, TVs, things that we want to control one by one. So I will jump now again to my PowerPoint. So and this is the summary. So looking for the stock control, that is the more simple way to implement Business Central on this area. We can have these different options. So we can say Business Central even does not have any location. So it's like a blank new location, everything is together. And if we select this option without any location, we can also work with items, and items with lot control, with serial, and another option that is also possible is both lot and serial at the same time. The second option is when we have one location without bins. Again, we can mix this combination with all the combination of the items. We can have several locations without bins. And again, the same story with the items. We can also have one location but with bins, and the same. Several locations with bins. And finally, we can mix together some location without bins and some of them with bins, and mixing these together with items, lots, serials, and lots and serials. So on this summary, this seems to be complex, but it is not. So it's all about to looking for your customer and just decide on the location or warehouse side what are the real needs, and looking for the items the same way. And what I want to share with all of you is that this combination is possible on a very easy way. The second big advantage is that you can change it during time. So you can start with one location, but after you can create more. You can have some items without lot control, but you can create new items with lot control. And this is really flexible. So adding some complexity to this. So I explained that at the beginning that in my perspective, there is two options to implement this area. What I call stock control that I just finished, and what I call warehouse control. That is when we have an independent user that interacts with the system without being directly with the source documents. So I will start now with this second step, and on the warehouse control, I will show what is the setup that is needed. So when we look for a warehouse, we have this tab here where we can say that for this warehouse, we need to have this step to receive, and that this means really when it is an inbound flow, or when we are shipping, and this is the outbound flow. And as you can see on my sandbox here on West Warehouse, I just populate that it requires receive and requires shipment. So it means that every time that we are transaction with this warehouse, the sales and the purchase or even the transfer will just release the documents, and after we will have an independent but linked process that will connect to that documents. So this is the first mandatory step, to look for the locations and create this setup. The second very important small setup is that we should create our user as a warehouse employee. This is very important. Without this step, we are not able to receive and to ship. And you just need to search warehouse employee on Business Central and just create the combination between the user and between the locations. And finally, if you search to the warehouse, global warehouse setup, you can find this option that you can say globally that you want to require receipt, put away, shipment, and pick. And I am taking this note with all of you because this setup is not really used. So what we should care about is location by location, these options and the warehouse. So the solution itself does not look for these because when you set up the location or the warehouse, this is the most important part. So I just refer here, and as you can see, it is off on all of them. But because it's on the West on these two options, when we are transaction with the West location, it will work this way with the on the receive and on the shipment. And what I explain in two steps, or having the business step that in this case on an inbound flow is the PO release. And after we have the second step that is really to create the warehouse receipt. So it is two steps. So this one is made by the purchase team that just release the PO when agrees the price, the quantities, the dates with the supplier or the vendor. This is one step. And after, when this PO arrives to your warehouse, this is the second step, that is the warehouse receipt. So I will jump again to the system, again on the initial page. And as you can see, this profile has a shortcut here, the warehouse receipt. This means that on my user, we do not have any warehouse receipt. I will create a new one. So I will accept a new number. I will say this is for the warehouse West. And now, if I want to connect to the source document, I have this option here that when I click, it will show all the POs, all the inbounds that I have pending for this warehouse. So now I am with the head of the person that works in the warehouse that does not have a clear idea what was the POs that were released, but now it just have a paper, just have some box to receive, and I am sure that has a connection with the PO. So when I click here, just brings the quantity for the pending quantities for this PO. And as you can see, the original quantity was 10 and 15, but it is pending only 9. Sorry, I just click on the wrong cell because one was already received, and now I will receive, for example, 5 and 5. But if I try to post now, it will not work. It will not work because the second item is lot tracking, and I do not upload the information about the lot. So the action that I need is to go to the tracking lines. And if there is some information about the lot, I can accept it or just delete and create a new one. So I will say 5. And now just post. And as you can see, so I have something wrong with this post, but what will happen is that it will create a posted warehouse receipt. That again, on our initial database, we can see here. So posted purchase receipt. And if we click, every time that we transact this way, it will create a posted transaction receipt. And at the same time, no, I said a posted warehouse receipt. So it creates automatically 2 documents, one for the warehouse and one other for the purchase, because this receipt will be used for the next step that will be to link to the purchase invoice using the 3-way match. So at the end, this warehouse control step is really very simple, because it just have 2 different users making one part of the process and the other part. But at the end, in terms of the update of the stock, it is really the same. But we can go further down in terms of this detail. So we can have the release, we can have the receipt, and we can have what is called the put away. So the receipt is the moment where you just count the quantities and you have on the receipt area, and the put away is where when you decide to bring these items to a different bin, to a different area. So for this case, I will create a new warehouse receipt, but now I will select the other warehouse that is the West 2, because it's West with 2 steps. And again, the same way of working. So I will select the PO. I just want to receive $10, and this line I do not receive anything, just the first line. And now I will post. So what happened was a new warehouse receipt was created and a new document that is the put away. So coming back to our initial page, we have here the put away, and as we can see, the West 2, we have the 10 that we receive. And this is a second step that we can use to put away these 10 items of this PO. The main question that I often listen is, when you decide the setup from 1 step or 2 steps, and my gold rule here is, if you have different moments where you receive and a different moment to put away, and it is made by a different user. So the user that made the receipt is a different one than the put away. I think that these two steps make sense. When you have a warehouse that the person that just received pick the goods and just put away on the final shelf, and if it is only one step, in my view, the right setup should be only warehouse with one step. So, and again, a summary. So, as you can see before, we can mix everything from the locations, and I mean locations, bins, one step, two steps, one step in the inflow and two steps on the outflow, because you can decide that when the goods are receiving, you want just one step, but when you are shipping, you have two steps, for example, the picking and the shipment, and you can combine all of these with all the options that we already saw about the item, the lot, the serial, and the lot and serial at the same time. So again, this is not complex, this is flexible, and the golden rule here is really try to have the right setup looking for the way that the warehouse works. And finally, the most advanced option that we have still on Business Central, that is called WMS, Warehouse Management System. And looking for the setup, again, on the location, we have this option that is direct put away and pick. And when we activate this option, it will automatically disable all these options and will make them enable without the option to disable. So when you decide that this warehouse, this location is automated location, you just need to click on this option and everything is disabled. After this, the next step is you need to create what is called the zones. And the zones are different areas of this warehouse where you can set up that these areas only allows one type of transaction. And as you can see on my example on the screen, I have a zone for picking, a zone for shipping, a zone for put away, and a zone for receive. Of course, that you can have a different zone for goods that are frozen, for goods that are with a short life, and you can have different zones to classify your warehouse in terms of the actions and in terms of the transactions that you can run. Finally, the third setup, and this is everything on the location card, is really to have a dedicated bin for the receipt, for the shipment, and for the adjustment. So these three are completely mandatory, and the next ones are needed if you run the manufacturing model. So if you do not use the manufacturing, you do not need to populate these fields. And this part is needed if you are using the assembly or kitting model. But again, if you are not using, you do not need to populate. And finally, looking for the automation. So this way of working, Business Central takes the ownership to automate some transaction. So for example, the put away template is a rule where the system will try to find alone what is the best bin where some item or some quantity of item should be stored. And there is a rule for that. To find an empty bin, to find a similar item, to find a bin ranking, there is a rule for that. And we can set up this rule. And after, we can also set up the system warehouse by warehouse or location by location to pick following the FIFO or not. So we have some rules that we can set up, and this area is the most advanced one. And we really need to look for the way of working of the warehouse physically to have the right setup here. Finally, and again, the warehouse employees, very important also. And again, the same that I mentioned before. Even if you look for the warehouse setup and you have this field, please do not take time to populate these. Just look for the location card that are really the important ones. So, in this case, in terms of the inbound, in terms of the steps, are really the similar as the two steps that I showed you before. So the PO release, that is one step. After we just create the warehouse and we post, and the system automatically create the put away. So in terms of this description, everything is the same. But under the hood, what happens is when we just post the first step, the items are stored on this dedicated zone and bin that we populate before. And the put away that is created follow the template and the rules that I explained, that if it is an empty bin or a similar item, or if this item does not have the volume that does not fit to one bin or the other. So this creation of the put away looks for these rules. And after, when we register the put away, so the items are stored on the final zone bin. So coming again for the system and just give you one example with this setup, even if in terms of the steps is really very similar to the latest one. A new warehouse. Now I will select the WMS location. I just get the PO. And again, I will receive just 2 units of this one. And when I post, as you can see in the screen, it creates a warehouse posted receipt and at the same time a new put away. And now it's really nice to look for the put away. That is the latest one. And as you can see, my 2 units of this item, this step of the put away is really to move from this dedicated bin, that is the receipt bin. And now the system, looking for the rules that I have set up on this warehouse, does not find any location that suggests to be the put away bin for this. So in this case, we can select the one manually, and after we can register. And the document is down and the quantities are moved from the receipt to the bin that I select on the put away. So a summary of this last option. when we select for a location that the direct and put away is mandatory, it means that we need to use zone and bins. We also need to set up a put away template to suggest the rules for the put away itself. I do not show, but there is a capacity policy internally that is possible to set up. That means that if our item has the weight and the volume inside the system, and we set up the bins with the maximum capacity, the system is able to decide what is the right bin to store this receipt or this put away automatically. And we can set up if we want to control the capacity or not, and we have these different options. We can select, as I said, the FIFO picking, but it is optional because you can use lots or not. And finally, when we have a lot of complexity on the warehouse during the peak waves, there is one option that is the bin ranking, that when you are creating the bins, the system just suggests to follow the right corridor, to follow the right way to be more productive, and we can use the bin ranking. I do not show this last option is just to give some insights about it because I was afraid of the available time in 1 hour. So I show different options that we can set up, and I think that it is clear to see that we can have very small companies using the basic stock control, or even some retailers that have advanced warehouse using BC to support their activities. This is inside the scope that Microsoft selects for Business Central, that is small, medium companies, but this scale of small, mediums is US. So in some European countries, a medium is very big. And that means that the range of the warehouse activities can be from 1 or 2 users for the whole company, or even 200 users in some PC implementation. So what are really my lessons learned how to implement Business Central on different companies with different needs on these areas? So in my view, BC is very flexible on this area. So if you combine the different setups that I show, we have a big number of options that you can mix together to allow to have the right setup for the business requirements of a customer. Before COVID, I said that this is mandatory to visit a warehouse in person, but now it is not allowed in some countries. But I still have the opinion that this is the best way to feel what is the complexity of the warehouse transactions. But of course, that we can use to film a warehouse, to share some sessions, but it's always good to see how they interact physically. In my opinion, we should keep it simple and smart. So if we ask with the empty paper a customer, what do you want for a warehouse? Usually he says that wants everything. Is like saying, I need the picks, I need the putaways, I need everything. And sometimes when we visit warehouse, it's just one person that makes everything. And in my opinion, if it is the same person, does not make sense to have a lot of steps, because you are asking the same person to make a lot of steps that means the same. So I would suggest really to start simple and smart. And again, small and you can grow. So if you create one location with one setup, if the company grows, you can set up another location and grow with the complexity. The good thing about Business Central is really that you can update the setup without customizations, and I think that this is the right way to move forward. I already talked about this. This is one of my gold rules. If several steps are made by the same user, does not split the steps. Just keep it simple. Of course, that if you receive during the morning by one person and after you have another one that is putting away, that can make sense to have two-step flow. Do not implement a solution to solve when a warehouse is chaotic. So organize first and automate after. A lot of times there are a lot of problems because they do not know what items should be stored, what items should be received or shipped. And in that case, a solution does not solve that type of problems. So a lot of times on this area, the best approach is to look, to suggest something on the way of working, but before starting implementing a solution. And I know that sometimes we mix together both. I have the same opinion about using handhelds, barcodes, and QR codes. So a lot of times we receive a prospect that say, I want barcodes, and after does not have any idea how to organize the warehouse. So in my view, organize first and automate after. And lastly, from my lessons learned, keep safe and warehouse yourself, because it's really important that you try the right setup with the different options, because these combinations is really the important part. And now I finish my slides and my slot of presenting, and I have no idea if we have a lot of questions. Can you help me, Raz, please?
Thank you once again, Jose, for that very elaborate session. A lot of interest. We've noticed a big spike in interest. So thank you once again for a very comprehensive coverage of this topic. So yeah, so the first question was related to warehouse and employee, basically users having multiple warehouse locations. And I believe Renato basically contributed to that, as, answering in yes. So warehouse employees can have an employee setup table. Yeah. The
so
next one is sorry.
On the print screen, I just show one combination, but we can have several lines. So of course that one warehouse person can work in several locations. Yes.
Great. And Musab has asked, what are the accounting entries when the post warehouse receipt and where to set up with the posting group?
Okay. So in fact, the warehouse transaction does not post in JL directly. So if you have a receipt, the receipt itself does not post in the JL automatically. What posts on the JL transaction is the purchase post receipt. So if you have the first setup of the stock control or the second one that I call it warehouse control, In terms of posting, it is the same, because when you receive the items, the post is the same because you are receiving from a PO. So in fact, the warehouse itself does not interact directly with the posting. Of course, that at the end of the month, the inventory costing routines looks for all the transactions of the inventory, but this is another part of the conversation. We can have 1 hour talking about that.
Yeah. So Isaac is asking the question, if the customer is not using bin contents, but in a short period is a possibility, do you recommend to use a warehouse or one bin, or use another warehouse in the future?
So after starting a use of a location, a warehouse, it is not possible to change to start to have bins after. So you need to create a second warehouse, move everything from the first to the second. And if this step is a nightmare in some cases, my suggestion is that you start to creating one location and one bin that is always the same bin. And in that case, it is bin mandatory, but it's always the same. So after, if you decide to create the second, the third bin, the setup is the same.
Fantastic. So the next question is, before Business Central, we had ADCS. How can we use ADS functionality in Business Central?
Not anymore. Not anymore. So I know that if you try to use it, you can use, but it's not supported anymore officially by Microsoft. So if you want to have a requirement to use handhelds, and usually ADCS is connected with handhelds, I would suggest to look for some ISVs that has these functionalities. I don't know, Raz, if being a community session, I can give some names about some ISVs or not.
Sure you can.
Yeah.
Yes. Why not? Yeah.
So as a starting point, I would suggest Tasklet. Tasklet is one ISV dedicated on the warehouse in handhelds, and it connects with Business Central and then also with F&O. And it is a very good solution to have the Business Central in handhelds. So my suggestion is, please do not use a DCS because it's not supported by Microsoft anymore, and move to an ISV, and Tasklet is one of them.
Great stuff. And so the next question is how to do an item adjust in a warehouse.
Okay. So the item adjustment in the warehouse depends on the configuration that you select. So during my presentation, I show several options. And if you select the first one, you have a way of looking for an item adjustment with a journal. But if you are using the most advanced one, the WMS, you have another way of making the adjustment. What I need to be clear is, independent of the setup that you select, you always have an option in Business Central Standard to make an adjustment, even if it is positive or negative. At the same time, you have a second option that is the physical counting. So that is the moment when you decide to physically count one by one, all the pieces and all the boxes and all the things, and you just want to enter the physical quantity. And of course, that in some cases you have adjustments because the quantity that you have on the system can be different.
Well, I have to say, Jose, thank you so much for your very concise answers and session. I think it was very well appreciated by everyone. And that brings us to the end of this session. Do you